Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
It's important to engage. Of course we have to challenge where we must, but it's better to engage to challenge than to stay aside, as it were. Important to cooperate where we can on issues like climate change. I'm very pleased with the engagement and the progress that we've made.
Well, in case that wasn't clear, that was Keir Starmer speaking about the UK's relationship with China after an apparent spying scandal threatens to undermine an attempt to reset ties. But does the UK really have a choice in the matter? Hello, you're listening to Bloomberg UK Politics. I'm Stephen Carroll.
And I'm Yuan. Welcome to the programme. So is a spying scandal going to again cause a rethink in relations between China and the UK? Court documents last week revealed that a 50-year-old Chinese man who'd been a business advisor to Prince Andrew had been banned from the UK on national security grounds last year. He was named in court on Monday as Yang Tenbo, a lobbyist who boasted a web of political and business contacts in Britain. China's foreign ministry has denied that Yan was acting as a spy. The man himself said he hasn't done anything wrong or unlawful, and that descriptions of him as a spy are completely untrue.
Well, this all comes after Keir Starmer has been pushing for so-called respectful relations with Beijing. He met the Chinese President Xi Jinping last month, the first meeting between British and Chinese leaders in almost 7 years. But now this story has led to increasing criticism of this approach and some calls for the UK government to up its scrutiny of China's influence in Britain, which would require those acting here on behalf of foreign powers to declare their activity. So it presents a dilemma for the government how to respond to security concerns without shutting the UK off from economic opportunity that the world's second largest economy presents.
Well, we're joined now by the Conservative MP and former Conservative Party leader, Iain Duncan Smith. He's one of the MPs who's been sanctioned by China for 3 years after raising the issue of human rights abuses in the country. Sir Iain, the statement from the Chinese embassy this morning says there are a handful of arrogant and shameless MPs with a twisted mentality towards China who are trying to smear the country. Do you recognise that description?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Very much so. They say it all the time. The one thing you can rely on with the Chinese embassy is they're not that original, and that they themselves just constantly repeat these ridiculous statements, it's because they have no experience themselves of understanding how democracy works and how members of parliament can challenge and can speak out. And we have freedom of speech here, which they don't, of course, in China, nor in the embassy. So, no, I normally ignore all of those stupid comments.
How serious is this incident? I mean, countries spy on each other, don't they? Presumably we have spies operating in China. What's the big deal about all of this?
Well, it's more than spies. I mean, the thing about our media with respect to you is that they suddenly see something and they latch onto it. And they've latched onto why this particular spy, because, of course, the role of Prince Andrew and all the rest. So it got slightly sidetracked into a story about Prince Andrew. And that's a story in itself, and it's not really what I consider to be the issue. The issue is it just illustrates what is really going on beneath the surface, which most people don't know and don't see. United Front is key to this. This individual is a member of the United Front. The United Front set up and reports directly back to President Xi, who I think refers to it as his magical unit. And there's a reason for that, because China's view is that everywhere they must know what's going on. They must try and influence any elements of what might happen by getting close to those people who have political power or who are part of political establishments. The United Front has over 40,000 operatives working globally, a very significant number, I gather, here in the UK, known in large, I think, to the security services, not always specifically, but they know that they're there. All of that is what is behind this one item. And there are plenty of others, by the way, who it's believed have already penetrated the political establishment, some very close indeed. And there is one, apart from there being a couple of spy issues going on and a court case about to happen. But there are also others that I believe the security services are watching who got right embedded into the political establishment. I'm not going to say any more because it would be not fair for me to release any of that. But my point is that this one issue has finally lifted the lid again on the idea of what is actually going on in here. And the truth is, as of course countries have spies to figure out what's going on, but this is on a scale beyond all comprehension. I mean, they have illegal police stations here. They've come over not on visas, these policemen. They drag in the dissidents. They threaten them with their families back in China to say they'll be arrested if they don't go back. They bully the Confucius Institute, which has offered its services for no charge at all, supposedly teaching issues around China. In fact, they spy. We know they spy on Chinese students, particularly the Hong Kong students that have been allowed to come over here.
These are issues that you've raised before. We've spoken to you before about them.
But they're real issues.
They're long running. But I want to know why haven't we done anything about it? Why does it take an incident like this one for more attention to be paid? You put this question in the House of Commons yesterday. Did you get a satisfactory answer?
No. And the first scheme, the foreign interest registration scheme, that the last government wanted to enact, although I'm prepared to admit the last government didn't really move fast on this at the time, but the security minister, Tom Tugendhat, is also a sanctioned MP like me, had managed to drive it to the point where it just needed now to be completed, which shouldn't take very long at all. We're talking literally a few weeks. But this government came in and their policy towards China had shifted, which they never told us. And I think it was almost a complete carbon copy of the failed Osborne golden era idea, which is you really need to have to talk to China to get growth. Growth very rarely comes from China these days. China itself has got financial problems. But more importantly, George Osborne's golden era literally resulted in huge numbers of Chinese students coming over to the UK and very little going back in the opposite direction and very little investment. There was some investment, but very low. What we did do is we opened up to all the goods that they made, often with slave labor, and bought those and allowed those to come in. So it was a one-way street, and it will be the same for them, only this time they will recognize they already have an embedded team of people working in the UK thanks to the previous failure.
But China still has a lot of economic heft. It is the world's second largest economy, and it has plenty of capital. We need more foreign investment. Should we really be saying no to their money in every field of the economy?
No, but we should. The thing about economics is it transcends politics in many respects. So if there are deals to be done, then those deals can get on anyway. The issue about us cozying up to China is on a different dimension. There is no need for this. China does its business with a very clear head, and at the end of it all, they will try and push the British government into doing things that they want, which the British government has serious issues about. There's a very good example of this going on right now. The Chinese want to move into the old Royal Mint, a very historic area and building for us, right near the Tower Bridge and where the road to Canary Wharf leads, and then one into the city. They want to move into that. It's a much bigger area, and there's almost certain, and everybody believes this in the security services, they will then bring more operatives and center them up there in that embassy. Spies, others from the United Front, all these sort of areas will come through. Now, the problem with that is nobody in the local area wants it. It's the worst place on earth for an embassy because it sits with roads right outside it, so any protest would literally shut down parts of the city and also of Canary Wharf. So all sorts of good issues why the police have not wanted it, and the council has rejected once and now has rejected it twice. Meanwhile, the government, thanks to the Foreign Office, has called it in. When they call in a bid for property like that, that means the government is almost certainly going to turn over the original decision from the council. And the council, for the second time, has already rejected it. But what was really interesting was the way that Keir Starmer used it in his opening remarks to President Xi when they met in Rio in that rather infamous meeting in which all the cameramen and everybody else were cleared out of the room. And what he said before they'd gone, you could hear him, he said, we want better relations, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you will note that we have now called in your bid for the embassy to the government. Now, why would he say that in what is essentially a higher-up discussion about relationships? And the answer is because the Chinese have pretty much said to the British government, if you want better relations, here's one thing you better get done straight away, and that give us that embassy.
Well, look, how much power does the UK really have in this relationship with China? Should it just be cutting off ties altogether? You've been extremely critical of them, so should the UK take a much more extreme approach and be an outlier on the global stage?
Well, we won't be an outlier because we are actually a backstop at the moment because everybody else, including Europe now, is getting much tougher on China. America is even talking now about sanctions. They're very worried.
So how
about
tough
what's
should the
going
UK get then?
Well, it's very simple. The UK must do what it can do. And what it can do, for example, is to ensure that when the Prime Minister talks about human rights, that we now check all product coming from areas that we know slave labor exists. You heard about the latest story about tomatoes coming via Italy. Well, the Interparliamentary Alliance from China, which I set up, has got 40 countries in it now. We could have told them that, and we did ages ago. Cotton coming from Xinjiang. The solar arrays that we're now literally laying out all over the country in a mad dash to net zero, they have polysilicon made in Xinjiang that is made with slave labor. You know, all of this is very clear and obvious. Organ harvesting in China, the terrible abuse that takes place of anybody of their religious minorities. You know, we need to start saying quite loud and publicly, unless China cleans up its act, it's very difficult for us to accept product made in China.
But does the UK really have? I mean, we're not part of the EU, so I wonder, does the UK really have any leverage with China? Surely China would just ignore a step like that.
Well, China can do what it likes at the end of the day. And of course, we have leverage because we control our economy. And the answer is that this is a good economy for China to want to be involved with, just like it would be with France and with Germany. The problem we've got right now is that we need to be very clear that what we have as a result of the free markets and properly run free markets is a vibrant economy. It's in pretty great difficulty at the moment, but that's mostly because of some bad decisions made by the government. But the reality is that that economy is worth investing in. But I just put this simple point. You know, we have a much bigger trade arrangement with America, and that is run in surplus as a result of financial services. And the other bit already is the government seems to be diving into this swimming pool marked China when lots and lots of companies are leaving and the water's going out. And that's because you do business in China, you set up a business in China, they take your IP, they steal it almost immediately. They often trash what you're doing there, they make it difficult for you under the national security law, and you end up with sometimes shadow factories or them copying everything you've done before. So many companies.
Sorry, I just want to ask you. I just want to ask you on President-elect Trump, do you think he'll be a full-on hawk towards China, or will his approach be more transactional, perhaps encouraging Chinese investment in America?
Well, I think he's very worried about China. To be fair, so was Biden. But I think he will be stronger than Biden. And I think China worries about Trump because the thing about Trump is they're not quite sure where he's going to go at any stage. But he's been very clear in his rhetoric. And look very carefully at who he's now saying is going to be his state secretary. Marco Rubio talked about an Interparliamentary Alliance on China having 40 countries in it. You have to have a parliamentary co-chair, one on the left and one on the right, but they have to be in your parliament. Rubio is one of our co-chairs from IPAC, and he is very worried about China. So, you know, you look at who he selects as much as what he says, and what you'll see is America is likely to start making very great demands on China about what they're doing. You know, they trash the WTO rules on a daily basis. They claim that they're not a full member because they're a developing nation. The second largest economy in the world, a developing nation. I mean, the honest truth is there's plenty of things the UK could do and the West should do. Start trying to invest and build up countries like India. You know, lots of members of the Commonwealth and Southeast Asia are dying for that sort of investment that goes into China at the moment, and they are much more reliable partners. They use English common law. They don't use what Chinese legal systems at all, and they have the capacity and some of the academic ability to be able to compete with China. That's what we should be doing, looking for competitors with China in other parts of the world that are much more reliable partners. And I think the European Union and Germany in particular are discovering what happens when you lay yourself open to total dependency on China. The German car industry is crashing at the moment because they stopped making anything and it all went to China to be made cheaply. And now they don't control any of that and they've got a real problem in their economy as a result. So you know, look around and pay heed to those who rushed there in a big way and are now getting their fingers burnt.
Iain Duncan Smith, Conservative MP, thank you very much for joining us. That's it from us for today. If you like the programme, don't forget to subscribe and give it 5 stars so other people can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify or wherever you listen.
This episode was produced by James Walcock and our audio engineer was Sean Guastamacchia. I'm Yuan Potts.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. We'll be back with more tomorrow. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg UK Politics. Listen weekdays at noon on DAB Digital Radio in London.